What up, Wizards? It's Dev, SBMTG. Ooh, we like magic. And I promise, if you're new here, that I don't do that every video. I'm sorry, it's the first and the last time, probably. But I'm coming to you with some late night, more likely early morning, Dominaria United spoilers. So grab up that 3 a.m. grilled cheese with that plate of nachos, probably both. I do that too sometimes. I'm not going to judge you. Maybe that morning cup of coffee. You can meet me out on the back patio, have that cup of Steamin' Joe between us, and we'll look out on the backyard and we will discuss some Magic the Gathering cards from Dominaria United. Doesn't that sound relaxing? Let's get to it. Now, we only got to see 9 cards on Saturday, which is fewer than we have been seeing so far, but at least a third of these are standard playable and possibly even beyond in other formats. But even the 6 that don't look quite so playable are still, in a lot of cases, pretty interesting to talk about and have some narrow applications, but those are still fun to talk about. However, the card that doesn't really tick any of those boxes for me today is Strength of the Coalition. This is just a green mana for an instant. It has kicker, 2 and a white. Target creature you control gets +2/+2 until end of turn. If this spell was kicked, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Now, probably the coolest thing about this card is the Lyra sighting in the art and flavor text, but aside from that, I guess it's a decent little combat trick in limited for these green-white aggro decks that could actually kind of help you alpha strike in the late game. So it's not a terrible card, but you probably won't play more than a copy of it in those limited piles. But let's go ahead and move on to the next one and save all the really talkative bits for the juiciest papayas. Here's Monstrous War Leech next. This is 4 mana, 3 and a black for a star Leech horror that you can kick for a blue mana. And as it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, you mill 4 cards. Its power and toughness are each equal to the highest mana value among cards in your graveyard. Alright, so I don't usually talk too much about older formats, but I get to try to say the name of a card that I love trying to say the name of. So in older formats, this could work pretty well with Autochthon Worm. Did I nail it? Or is that actually not how you say the name of this card? But still, you put a worm into your graveyard, it's a 15/15, bud. Look out. So that's not bad, but it's still probably pretty bad for 5 total mana if you kick it. Even if you don't have to kick it. 4 mana? That's actually an interesting design question. A 4 mana vanilla 15/15. Is that too much? I'm pretty sure it's actually kind of not, especially when you have to jump through this many hoops to make that big. But even in standard, I guess you could easily make this a 7/7 just because you play like Titan of Industry in your deck, right? Soul Tie, Reanimator, something like that. But even then, it's just kind of a vanilla 7/7. And you don't really care. Okay, I paid 5 mana. I guess you get to self-mill, which is good in a Reanimator deck. So maybe, but even then, I just think there's going to be better ways you can use your slots than just to have like a big fat 4 mana guy who just doesn't do anything, just sits there like a grapefruit. So I'm just not too sure. I mean, yeah, he attacks and blocks. Stats are worth something, right? But I don't know. I think we're at the point, even in standard now, the most powered down, quote unquote, format, where just like a vanilla 7/7 for 4 is, whatever. Give me a card that actually does stuff. So as much as I want to be excited about this thing because like, ooh, it could be like a 9/9. It's just like, okay, then what? I think there just needs to be a little bit more nowadays. So I'm excited about potential applications, but it's one of those cards that strikes me as a card that you do the thing, right? Like, you build the deck around it, you make it a 7/7 on turn 4, and then like, you just really don't feel that fulfilled by that, right? So, cool little budget guy here. I think there are interesting setups, but at the end of the day, yawn? Have I reached that point? I think I kind of have. The art is also kind of off-putting, borderline inappropriate, but I'm not going to talk about that anymore. Let's move on to Protect the Negotiators here. We're moving into some kind of actually playable stuff. This is 2 mana, 1 and a blue for an instant with kicker white. If the spell was kicked, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 1 for each creature you control. So this wants you to play it in a deck that has 1-drop creatures a lot of the time, and Delver of Secrets is just such that deck in standard. The like Legacy Delver deck, no, I don't know, not this card, but in standard, yeah, pretty good. But if you don't get your Delver on turn 1 and instead you're playing like Illuminator Virtuoso or Storm Chaser Drake on turn 2, that's fine. You can still save this till turn 3, where it effectively becomes like a make disappear that you have to pay an extra mana for. That's not too bad either. But even in the tempo decks, it becomes a little less useful starting on like turn 5, right? But in a decent tempo deck, hopefully you don't make it that far, and maybe even on turn 5 or 6 your opponent played a spell on their turn, so they have mana left open for removal, but they don't have mana left open to pay 2 for this counter spell. I mean, I could still see this being pretty useful decently into the mid game, but not too far into the late game, like all of these are, right? But still, in a lot of like blue-white decks that actually do play creatures, and there are a few of them in this standard, this could be pretty decent for sweeper protection if nothing else, right? And a lot of times this is going to read counter target depopulate unless your opponent pays 2 or 3, and that's going to be hard for them to do, so I do think this could see a decent amount of play. Part of me even wants to think that like a blue-white control deck could be okay with this, or a blue-white base control deck, only because, and hear me out here, that like Wandering Emperor exists, and Kaito Shizuki exists, and there are a creature or 2 that you might want to play in that deck, like Obscura Interceptor, for instance. There's a number of creatures that like blue-white and Esper Control actually do play, so even in those decks, this card doesn't look like the worst card, because they might have like a token or 2 on the table and then like 1 actual creature, and then they kick this, and then suddenly it's 3 mana for counter target spell unless they pay 4, and you get a dude out of it, which like isn't bad in the right kind of deck. I think there's a compulsion to look at this card and be like, that's a Jwari Disruption I have to pay extra mana for, like jump through hoops for, I have to already have a creature on the table to just naturally cast this for 2 mana, and it's a Jwari Disruption. Whereas Jwari Disruption I could have just cast for 2 mana or played it as a land, and that rotates, and is this really this better? I don't know that it's better than Jwari, but I think it's like parallel in terms of power level to a card like Jwari Disruption, and that was a really important card for the last couple of years here. So I think that, again, not in the exact same decks as Jwari, but in certain decks, this could fulfill a similar role and be this nice little like early to mid game counterspell that keeps removal off your back or keeps your opponent from resolving really important stuff. And for those tempo decks, that's all they really need a lot of the time. So I think this is a card that could see some play. But let's move on to a card that won't see any play in Standard, but it's still like one of the cards I'm most excited about today, because they finally reprinted Dragon Whelp. Here it is, guys. I don't even have to do a slide for this one. It's Dragon Whelp. You guys know what Dragon Whelp is, right? And even if you don't, it's 4 mana, 2 and a red for a 2/3 flyer that has 1 red mana +1/+0 till end of turn, but if you activate the ability more than 3 times in a turn, then you have to sacrifice it at the end step. So that's what Dragon Whelp does. I could read you that card in my sleep. It's not good. By today's standards, this card is not good, but this is a beloved card that old-timers like me are going to pop for every time they see it. It's not going to do much. It's going to get in the ring. It's going to roll somebody up. You think it's going to get 3 and take the title, but they're just going to kick out at 2 and hit their finish. And just like, this is not a great Magic card, but it is still a neat little 4-drop dragon that is nowhere near the like 4 mana 4/4 flying dragons that we've seen the last few years that still don't tend to see any play. It's not even at that power level, but there are good things about Whelp, right? If you have extra mana to pump into it, like, you know, this is 4 mana, you're attacking with it on turn 5. You probably have all your mana open, so even if you have to sack it at the end step, it still potentially gets in for 6 flying damage. 7, right? If you played a land, that's potentially 7 flying damage. So there are, and have been in my Magic playing life, plenty of spots where Dragon Whelp can be a decent card, but I hate to say it, but this is one of those cards that will prove to us all how far we've come in terms of like creature design, and I hesitate to use the word power creep, but I think power creep is a neutral term. I don't think it has to be a term dripping with the kind of bitterness that people usually employ it with. I think it can be a neutral term, and that's how I'm employing it here. You know, maybe creatures needed to get a little bit more powerful, maybe spells needed to get a little less powerful, and I think Dragon Whelp is a good signpost for the progress we've made in those areas. But I still love Dragon Whelp nonetheless. He's my little boy. He's my little boy. He's just, you know, they made him cuter than ever. He's oh my goodness, I love Dragon Whelp. But anyway, what's the next card I want to talk about? I have a choice. I can talk about an uncommon legend that I don't think is going to see too much standard play, or I could talk about an uncommon not legend that I think is going to see tons of standard play and is deceptively good. So I think I'll pick the uncommon legend first, especially considering I popped for even seeing this name on a Magic card. Hopefully, I can pronounce it correctly, because I've been trying to say this word since I was 11 years old, and I'm still not sure that I'm doing it right. Let's look at Torii Davenant. Torii Davenant, Fury Rider. This is 4 mana, 1, 2 red, and a white for a 3/3 legendary human knight with vigilance and trample. Whenever Davenant, Fury Rider attacks, is it Davenant? I use Diodario strings. Those are pronounced Diodario. Is this Davenant? I need to know more people. But anyway, Fury Rider attacks. All other attacking creatures you control get +1/+1 till end of turn. Other red attacking creatures you control gain trample. Other white attacking creatures you control get untapped. All right, so here's the cynical bit of me here. It's a 4-mana 3/3. Like, it does have some decent keyword abilities. It's vigilant, so it's like Wandering Emperor proof. It's not bad. You know, like, trample's always good, but it's a 4-mana 3/3. Like, trample is still there. It exists on the card, but it's not going to trample over that much that late into the game, and it can't attack until turn 5. So you play it on turn 4 and it does nothing, and then the next turn you get swept. So that happens. I mean, again, this is really cynical sounding of me, but like, these are actually relatively likely things to happen, right? I mean, it gets removed before it can attack. The whole board gets swept before it can attack. The fact that this doesn't have some form of haste is kind of disheartening for the card's real chances in Standard, but the ability to give the rest of your team, the whole rest of your team an Anthem effect, doesn't give it to itself, but the whole rest of the team gets the Anthem. And then Trample is actually a really important ability to give to all your other red creatures too. So that ain't shabby, you know. Like, but there are like weird lines, like, you know, you want your creatures, the other creatures you played below curve on this, before this, to be Boros colored, right? You want them to, your 2-drop to be red-white, your 3-drop to be, you know, 1 red-white or something like that. But if you play like Sunrise Cavalier the turn before this, oh cool, it gets Trample. It already had that, so you know, at least you get to untap. Again, 4-mana dude, low stats, even with the keyword abilities, low stats. Has to wait a turn to attack. It's just probably as not very good, and I apologize for that. This next one, I think, is going to be a standard, not necessarily all-star, but one of those role players that you just cannot underestimate how good it actually is. Let's take a look here at Yavamaya Iconoclast. This is 2 mana, 1 and a green for a 3/2 elf with kicker red. It also has trample, and when it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, it gets +1/+1 and gains haste until end of turn. This just looks so good to me. You know, it's a 2 mana 3/2. It has trample. I was going to say it's vanilla aside from that, but no, 2 mana 3/2 they threw a decent keyword ability onto. So it just tramples over chump blocks and kills planeswalkers and stuff. Like, kind of decent. As a 3 mana thing, it's still really good, man. A 3 mana, 4 power thing that comes down and swings that same turn. Like in Gruul aggro, there's a line on the play where you can go, like, you know, turn 1 Kumano faces Kakazan. You don't even have to do that. It's like turn 1 Kumano, hit him for damage. Turn 2 Bloodthirsty Adversary, swings for 3. They're at 16. Turn 3, play this, swing for 7. You know, they're like 9 before they played their 3rd land. Like, that actually seems pretty good. So, just the fact, this does something I was kind of talking about earlier on the, you know, counterspell with kicker. It's kind of a 1 mana kicker day, wasn't it? But this is probably just easily the best of this cycle, I would say. The 1 mana kicker cycle at uncommon. Because this does something similar to that counterspell, right? If you don't have a 2-drop creature, then you can play it on turn 2, and you have a decently, like, stocky, you know, like 3/2 trample. It's like you didn't really do too bad in terms of rate for what you paid on turn 2. But if you have a 2-drop you'd rather play, right, then just play that, and then play this on turn 3, right? Or if you have a 3-drop you'd rather play than this, then just play this as your 2-drop, and then play your better 3-drop, right? Depends on what your lines look like. And I just really like that kind of flexibility. And the card is still really good when drawn off the top of your library on like turn 9 or whatever. Or like after your opponent drops Sweeper, right? Your opponent hits Meat Hook. Well, you can take away all the life they just gained back from their Meat Hook with this, or you can just punch a hole back into their life total with it, one way or the other, right? It's just a really neat dude. It's great top deck, great on curve, whether you're playing it on 2 or 3. Just a really streamlined, pushed creature with kicker that is efficient, pretty much no matter when you play. It's more or less locked into Gruul decks, but that's, who cares? That's fine. It's good, even. So, just a solid little uncommon that might actually be the best or second best card of the whole day. But let's get into the rares here. There were 3 rares slash mythics today, and one of them is less impressive than some of the uncommons that we've already looked at. Let's check out Kelden Flame Sage real quick. This is 3 mana, 2 and a red for a 2/3 human shaman with Enlist. Whenever Kelden Flame Sage attacks, look at the top X cards of your library, where X is Kelden Flame Sage's power. You may exile an instant or sorcery card with mana value X or less from among them, but the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. You may cast the exiled card without paying its mana cost. Now, I say this is not as impressive as the other cards. I really don't want to, influence your opinion, but I'm pretty sure you could read this card and be like, meh. There are ways to look at this card in a very positive light. It swings on turn 4, you enlist something, so that way you get to look at more cards. You get to get a better card, technically, right? So, maybe it casts something for free, but I do feel like in most real-world situations, you're going to tap down a creature to enlist it. That means that creature can't block on the next swing, and by the way, it's like turn 3 or 4, so you're going to get swung into very likely. So that creature can't swing, or block, or whatever. So you boost this thing's power by 2 or 3 points, right? Still gets blocked and dies. So you might get, and I'm not saying it's going to happen every time, but still, you might get this ability precisely once. And I just think there's better ways of spending 3 mana. If you can give this haste somehow, here's the caveat there. If you go turn 3 Reckless Stormseeker, and then turn 4 this, that's not bad, right? Because you can give this +1/+0 in haste with the Stormseeker, look 3 cards deep and grab something instant speed to cast. There are good things about this card, especially when given haste, but ultimately this strikes me as kind of a bulkish rare. Doesn't do much the turn it comes out. There are way better things on curve with it that you could be doing in standard. This is in the same spot on your curve as Fable of the Mirror Breaker. So I'm not saying you can't play other 3-drops in your deck. It's just you have to compare it to the power level of other 3-drops you could be playing. And even though it's a neat little thing that can get you free spells sometimes, I'm just not sure it's where it needs to be to see real play in Standard. So let's look at a couple of cards I do think are pretty good. Again, not to influence your opinion. I'm pretty sure they're decent. Here's Plaza of Heroes here. This is a land. You can tap and make a colorless with it. Or you can tap to add a mana of any color. But you can spend that only to cast a legendary spell. It has a 3rd tap ability. You can tap it to add a mana of any color among legendary permanents that you do control. Or a 4th tap ability. You can pay 3 and tap it and exile Plaza to have target legendary creature you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Do you guys mind for a second if, since we're only talking about 9 cards today, and it's probably going to be a shorter video than usual, that means that I actually, weirdly, can talk more about cards than I normally do. And it's kind of okay, right? So let me kind of go off on a weird train of thought here. But we have already gotten to the point. This card was spoiled, 6-8 hours ago as I record this. We have already gotten to the point where multiple content creators, and I'm not calling anyone in specific out. I'm not even really whinging or anything. I'm just making a statement of fact. I've seen multiple content creators take the contrarian point that actually, no, you're wrong. This card, not me specifically, but anyone saying, you're wrong. This card isn't good in Commander. And I think the whole reason that they're saying that is because it's content creator brain. If anybody knows content creator brain, it's me, because I'm one of those. But I think it's content creator brain. Because you have to take these weirdly contrarian takes when it comes to Magic cards. I'm not immune to this. I do it all the time. X good card is actually bad. X bad card is actually good. This is a content creator thing. It's content. You have to make takes. It's important to have takes that are spicy or hot or not the same thing everybody else is saying, because you have to set yourself apart and oh, what's this person saying? Oh, that's spicy there. They're not saying the same thing everybody else is saying. And so we have already reached the part of this cycle, the cycle of a new and cool and exciting card being spoiled, where we have the content creators who are actually, the card is bad in the format it's very obviously good in. See, I made a take. And that part of that bugs me, because this card is pretty obviously decent Commander. Now, let me tell you how it's not. Let me tell you the potential ways that it could not be good in Commander. Until you play your Commander, every spell besides your Commander that you cast with this only can tap for colorless mana for. Okay. If your opponent kills your Commander, that functionally turns this card off, unless, of course, you have other legendary creatures. a lot of commander decks will have more than one legendary creature in them. A lot of people don't seem to, I've seen takes today, a lot of people don't seem to understand that. Sorry if I sound cynical. But even if your opponent does kill your commander, you can play it. You play it out of the command zone again. People act like you can't turn the card back on once your commander's gone. Oh, and by the way, you may have not noticed it, but on the bottom of the card there's an ability that actually keeps your opponent from killing your commander. I don't know if it's right there. I mean, I know. I don't know. Maybe I sound like some kind of way here. I'm not too sure, but just like the takes that I've seen on this card and the cycle. It's the cycle. It's predictable. It's boring, right? The card comes out. The card is obviously good. People say the card is good, and then everyone whose job it is to make content on the internet is like, actually, this card is terrible. Like, no, you don't. You can trust your lying eyes. The card looks pretty good in Commander to me for a lot of different reasons. It protects commanders. Hey, it makes any color once you have a commander out. Hey, like all of that is pretty obviously good. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that a bad card a good card is bad, right? But how good is it in other formats? Well, it's probably playable in Kethis. In Historic, this is playable in Kethis. In Historic, again, this is playable in Bard class. We lost. Bard class rotates when we get this card. It's ridiculous. But still, this card is obviously really good in multiple Historic and Explorer decks. In Standard, maybe. Maybe it's okay. It's obviously playable in Brawl, right? So, multiple formats, this is at least decent. And again, even in Standard, especially if you have a creature that's legendary and you really need to protect, decent thing. I think that there are, even in Standard, like real lines with this card, but especially in Commander, the format the card is obviously meant for. Yes, it's a playable card. I'm not going to lie to you for what? Engagement? It's a good card. Anyway, I guess we should talk about the last card of the day. We'll see how all that goes over. I guess the irony of it all, if you really want to hit me, is that I'm hitting content creators for content creator brain and the need to make takes, but have I not just made the ultimate take? Was that not in and of itself a take? So, a snake eating its own butthole. That's content creation. The Ouroboros of takes. But anyway, I shouldn't get too existential here. Let's talk about Karn. Old Karn dog. It's like corn dog, but with Karn. Let's talk about Karn, baby. He's a living like a sea. This is 4 mana. This card costs 4 mana to cast, and it has 4 loyalty. It's a legendary Planeswalker Karn. This +1 is create a tapped Power Stone token. Now, if you've never heard that would make sense because it's never been a thing before. No one's ever said it. Except, well, that's not true. Power Stone was a game on Dreamcast. It was actually pretty good. But anyway, a Power Stone token is an artifact with tap to create a colorless. This mana can't be spent to cast a non-artifact spell. The -1 is pay any amount of mana. Look at that many cards from the top of your library, then put one of those cards into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. -7, you get an emblem with tap an untapped artifact you control. This emblem deals a damage to any target. So we get 2 Morrow teasers in one card here, right? A new evergreen token, the Power Stone, which is just... That's a word to use, but either way, I would imagine, to see more Power Stones. Once we get to Brothers War, probably going to be a lot of Power Stone things happening. So a little glimpse into the future, I imagine, in terms of mechanics there. But the -7 is also the Morrow teaser. Pay any amount of mana was rules text on a card. How good is this? It's all right. It's not great. It could be better. The more I think about it, the more I think it's actually kind of terrible. Again, maybe I'm used to old school ways of card evaluation, but Planeswalkers need to either they can do any of these things. They can make a creature to block for them. They can destroy a creature or exile, whatever. They can get rid of a permanent on the battlefield to help protect them as well. Or they can draw cards to replace themselves. Right? So that way, if your opponent plays a removal spell on it, well, you still got a card out of it. So you're up in that exchange. This doesn't do any of that the turn it comes into play on curve. So, if you pay 5 for it, it at least draws the card. It at least does that. But even then, I'm just not sure. The actual cool thing about this card is the ultimate. I don't usually talk about Planeswalker ultimates too much, but this is the kind of ultimate I dream about. This pays you off for playing a bunch of like lame 1 and 2 mana artifacts. Like, it's kind of stuff I am admittedly sort of ashamedly into. So if you can ever get the ultimate off, I want to hear those fishing stories. But aside from that, I'm just not really sure this is a very impressive Planeswalker. So that settles it, I guess. The best card of the day is Yavamaya Iconoclast. I really think it might be, This is better than the Planeswalker everyone's going to get hype about. I haven't really seen much talk online about Karn, to be honest. But I would imagine it's probably not glowing praise for the most part. And I guess I'll add my voice to the chorus of I can only imagine is surrounding the Karn. Richard Karn, whole Al from Home Improvement. How do I know his name? I guess when you host Family Feud, I'll remember your name forever. Hey, Richard Karn. But anyway, neat little day of spoilers, one way or the other. I think that Karn is a bit of a letdown for a lot of people. But still, there are applications for Karn. Some people aren't going to love that new Commander land or whatever, but I think that that's probably in some ways the best card of the day for a certain segment of the community, right? But for me, still good old the last remaining standard player on Earth, I'm really excited about Iconoclast and even the little counterspell thing. But let me know how you felt about everything today. There's some stuff to talk about. There's some diamonds in this rough for the weekend. But, tomorrow, just to let you know, tomorrow or tonight, Sunday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I'm going to be on the twitch.tv/SBMTGdev talking about whatever spoilers we get on Sunday and also talking about how I feel about the set so far, how we as a community, or at least my community, feels about the set so far, my top 5 or 10 favorite cards they've spoiled up to now. Like, we're going to be having a lot of fun on Sunday night. So bring a friend, crack a brew, whatever you want to do, and just chill out with us on the couch. Well, really, I guess I'll be in the computer chair. But, come join Twitch. Don't be scared of the platform. I was a boomer once, too. I didn't understand Twitch. What is Twitch? What is Twatch? Come join us over there. Don't be frightened. We have a good time. And check out the spoiler talk on Sunday night, and then we'll get back Monday morning to the couch where we'll be talking about some cards again. But aside from that, check out the Patreon. It's $1 a month to support the content. That's all I ask. And then you'll be able to vote on what decks we do when Dominaria United is legal to play in Standard. So do all that stuff. Helps me out more than you can imagine. Also like, subscribe, do the things. We're trying to get to 3 million subscribers. Obviously, we're at 126K now, so we're not too far away. Just help out with that. And I guess I'm done. I guess these videos have been 45 minutes so far this spoiler season, so I feel the need. My body and mind have kind of a muscle memory to fill that time space. So I apologize for that. I swear I'm not padding the video. I love you. I'm Deb from the place. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Spread love and be kind.